All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 17th installment of the Regional Report, a GPEC Virtual Series. A very timely topic today. We will be discussing the upcoming school year and address how they are approaching health and safety concerns, as well as the digital divide, and what the education system might look like in the coming years. My name is Eric Sperling. I'm the Managing Director at the Social Television Network. If you're not familiar with STN, we are a local media company based in downtown Phoenix. We have a streaming network where all of our shows and segments are dedicated to local leadership, community growth, and actionable solutions. That is where we formed our partnership with GPEC and their CEO, Chris Camacho, who you'll be hearing from in just a moment. So very excited, as always, to be partnered with GPEC on this virtual series. We want to mention the upcoming regional report. Again, very timely. The next regional report will be on the status of sports. That will be Tuesday, August 25th from 11 a.m. to noon. Our panelists there will include Javier Gutierrez, the new CEO of the Arizona Coyotes, Derek Hall, the CEO of the Arizona Diamondbacks, and Jason Rowley, the CEO of the Phoenix Suns and the Phoenix Mercury. Again, that will be Tuesday, August 25th. And as always, if this is the first time you're joining us for a regional report, you can always check out past installments by visiting GPEC's website. That is gpec.org/blog. Okay, again, for the new attendees, and we do have a lot of attendees today, some housekeeping items very quick to go over. Today's webinar will run for approximately 1 hour. Audience members will be muted and without video. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the GPEC website and social media sites. You may submit questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, but due to time constraints, we may not be able to get to all those questions. Should you experience any technical difficulties at all, please just, as always, try logging out, logging back in. That usually fixes it. And then we invite you to share this information on social media. Please feel free to tag GPEC and use the hashtag #PHXTogether where appropriate. Okay, today's regional report will be structured into two sections. We will start with a brief overview from our panelists, and then we will move into live Q&A. Today we're hearing, I'm going to introduce the panelists, Chris Camacho, as I mentioned, President and CEO of GPEC, Dr. Chad Gestson, Superintendent, Phoenix Union High School District, Dr. Stephen Gonzales, Interim Chancellor, Maricopa Community Colleges, Julia Meyerson, Founder and Executive Director at Vista College Prep, and Stephanie Parra, Executive Director, All In Education. And before we get to our panelists, I want to bring Chris into the conversation. I know you have some perspective to share with us. Again, such a timely topic here, as a lot of us are focused on education, getting back into schools with our kids. So Chris, I'll let you have the floor.
Thank you, Eric. And as a parent, I know my home life, we are absolutely excited to get our kids back learning and certainly digital and in the classroom. I'm excited to hear from these national leaders today, and we're fortunate to have these four respectively that are well known in the various circles nationally for their leadership. And so again, I'm excited to hear from them. But first, I wanted to give some color to the importance of this topic, in that we certainly grasp the nexus between economic development outcomes, job outcomes, an advanced and dynamic economy with education and educational attainment. And that's got to be education for all. And many of us have been in this debate for quite some time now as to how do we ensure the necessary resources are making it into the classroom, making it into the districts that ensure we are advancing the next generation workforce. At the end of the day, it all comes down in our world of recruiting companies and growing and scaling enterprises to having the requisite workforce with the requisite skills to meet the globally changing demands. And in today's environment, I can tell you that the marked change in outcomes in the last 20 years, we've seen absolute advancement in our education system, really top to bottom. And as you look on the horizon, I had a great chance to talk to Dr. Gonzales recently about this 2.0 model that he's focused on, which is really about putting the community college in a nimble position to meet industry demands, short-term and medium-term demands. And that's what the community college is all about. And so with that, there's other aspects related to the digital divide. I think what you'll probably hear from the panelists today, the advancement of COVID has certainly put a spotlight on the reality that we're dealing with in our community, but nationally as an issue of some of these students not having the primary access to technology, tools, as well as Wi-Fi and capacity. We must be doing more. And so what it looks like on the horizon, and what I wanted to share with you today, is GPEC, along with our peer organizations, unlike ever before, is going to be heavily focused on how do we ensure we're enhancing the tax competitiveness of our region and of our state, but coupled with how do we create the requisite tax modernization to ensure we have the requisite funding infrastructure long-term for education. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be working with a lot of peer organizations and partners. Now is our time to lead on this, and I'm just very fortunate along with our audience today to have these esteemed leaders join us. So thanks for just a bit of time, Eric, and I'll kick it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I know you might have to log off at some point today. So again, appreciate your time joining us this afternoon. We're going to start with Chad. Dr. Gestson has served as superintendent of the Phoenix Union High School District since the fall of 2015, previously serving as the district's director of leadership. He was previously an elementary school assistant principal and middle school principal. Under his leadership, the district has launched several new schools, including a Gifted and Talented Academy, a Digital Academy, and the Phoenix Cody Academy. Doctor, thank you for joining us, and again, for our panelists today and for the viewers, excited to hear your perspective as we move into education this year and beyond.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me, and hopefully the PowerPoint is up for you all to see. We have a few minutes to do an introduction and share perspective, and I know throughout the rest of the panel, I would love to share my personal and professional perspective on launch of school, digital divide. But what I thought I would do just to kick off today is to show through pictures what launch of school looks like today, what this experience of remote learning, what digital divide really looks and feels like. And so today I'm going to walk you through just a quick presentation. You can go to the next slide. But before we do that, this is the time of year when typically school systems, charter schools, districts are bringing back staff, doing welcome back convocations and staff meetings. Next slide. This is the time of year when we are bringing freshmen and new students. Phoenix Union serves 28,000 students. We have 8,000 new freshmen that come to us every single year. Next slide. What we typically see in mornings is Pledge of Allegiance and Monday morning lineups. Next slide. You'll typically see students on campus mixing and mingling. Next. You will also see students getting to know each other and know their teachers for the first time. Next slide. What you will normally see, this was me a year ago to the date, in classrooms, having fun with teachers and kids. Next slide. When we entered classrooms, we could not only mingle with students, we were able to shake hands. Next slide. Social distancing was not a thing a year ago. Next slide. And we not only could shake hands, but we could even embrace each other. Next slide. Certainly this has changed. This particular virus has changed virtually everything. Next slide. And as I've joked with many people, we said last year when we closed schools that the spike was going to be in April and May and we'd be back to normal this year. That is certainly not the case. In fact, school looks very different this year. You can go to the next. When you show up to a campus today, especially in Phoenix Union, often you'll be asked to start in your car. You'll be met with people with masks and gloves and plexiglass. Next. If you are able to get onto campus, yes, you'll be met with security, but we socially distance, can say hi in unique COVID ways. Next slide. If you're actually going to walk onto campus even further, all of our campuses have daily health checks. Next slide. Those health checks are temperature checks, surveys to find out if we're experiencing any symptoms. You can go to the next. If you are a family member and you want to register, yes, you'll be met with someone with a smiling face, but that face will be behind a mask, behind plexiglass as we bring new students and families on to campuses. You can go to the next. We still do food service. We know that hunger and food insecurity is a massive issue here in Greater Phoenix. The vast majority of youth that attend K-12 schools across our state, but certainly here in the Valley, qualify for free and reduced lunch rate. Our food service workers will serve food on the sidewalk. We're trying to keep social distancing to a minimum or to a maximum, gathering to a minimum. You can go to the next slide. We even pre-package food for the entire week. We'll put it in your car so you don't even have to get out of your car in the morning. Next slide. We also, and you'll hear a lot from panelists today, I know that Stephanie Parra will spend time on digital divide as well. You heard Chris Camacho mention this a few minutes ago. The digital divide is wide and it's real, and we're seeing it firsthand. Phoenix Union has been giving out laptops and hotspots. Next slide. We've had to launch really complex help desks and help systems. When we give out 30,000 laptops, that means we need to provide tech support for 30,000 laptops at the same time. Next slide. What you also see on campuses look and feel very differently. We've had to shut down most parts of our campus, sanitize them, block them off. Next slide. What you see is counselors and social workers and office staff members working alone, early mornings, late nights to serve the social, emotional, and academic needs of our community. Next slide. The school campus itself, the hallways are clear, they're quiet in a very eerie way. Next slide. And when you walk into classrooms, what you see is teachers teaching. We gave teachers the option in Phoenix Union, if they thought that they were at their best in a classroom, they could teach remotely from their room. If they thought they were best at home, we gave them an opportunity to teach at home. Next slide. And you see teachers doing all they can to build relationships virtually. It's different than last year when we already had relationships and then went into closure. This year, we're trying to build relationships for the first time technologically. Next slide. I had a chance on Monday to experience a class. This is at the academies at South Mountain. I spent a few minutes live with a class of ceramics students. We're even having to try to do ceramics virtually. Next slide. And what our teachers are experiencing today are empty classrooms, but full screens. And they're trying to find very unique ways to deliver instruction. In Phoenix Union, we're doing all live virtual instruction every day. Next slide. And as I said, not every teacher comes to campus. About 60% of our teachers have chosen to teach from home. And so our teachers are creating spaces in their houses. Sometimes they're also managing their own children as they're delivering lessons to our beautiful young men and young women. Next slide. We not only deliver lessons, we also do CTE programming. We do Pledge of Allegiance at home. We make sure that we are trying to create the best possible learning experience, even in this remote setting. Next and final slide is our students, that we've been working really hard to reach out to all of our students. We've been encouraging them to, wherever they live, whatever their house looks like, whatever their main home looks like, that they have a space to learn, a way to engage, and are going to continue to, as best as possible during this remote environment, meet the social, emotional, academic, personal, and psychological needs of our students. And so that's it. I think I had one more slide that just captures our portfolio. I just wanted to give you, through pictures, what launch of school looks and feels like in this COVID world. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. And what a difference, again, being able to visualize that, seeing last year compared to this year. And we're going to bring you in just a few moments for some Q&A. We do have a lot of questions coming in. I want to bring Stephen into the conversation now. Dr. Stephen Gonzales assumed the role of Interim Chancellor of the Maricopa County Community College District back in January of this year, 2020. He had been serving as the president of Gateway Community College at the time. He previously served 15 years in various leadership roles at the Pinal County Community College District, and Dr. Gonzales is an alumni of the University of Texas at Austin's Community College Leadership Doctoral Program and NAU. Dr. Gonzales, we just heard from Chad, so we'd love your perspective on the community college side of things.
Thank you, Eric. And I want to thank Chris Camacho and team at GPEC for providing me the opportunity to share what we've been doing in the Maricopa District. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. It's just going to be some background data for you to see as I'm speaking. I'm not really going to speak to these, but I'll let you know that as you mentioned, I came into this role in interim fashion at the end of January. And by our spring break, we were faced with the pandemic, as many of you have been faced with. And I appreciate Chad's presentation of pictures, because in every single one of those, I'm shaking my head thinking that's exactly what we've been experiencing, what we've been going through. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, in the middle of March, we moved 21,000 of nearly 22,000 classes from face-to-face to an online environment. We had 106,000 students enrolled in that time. And then, of course, with the remaining courses that we weren't able to move to an online environment, we spent the summer months finishing those up. And as you can imagine, some of those courses and programs would be of the CTE nature, where it is nearly impossible, if not allowable, to do in a face-to-face climate. We've worked with our communities by, having our campuses serve as testing sites. Nearly all of our campuses have served as an ongoing testing site. We've donated PPE to local clinics and hospitals that were in need. And of course, we've made some modifications to our tuition structure to help those students of greatest need to be able to come take courses and have more financial assistance for the fall semester, and to be able to take more at a price that is the same once you reach 12 credit hours and beyond. This is, again, to help those in greatest need. Our focus has also been on what next? What do we do as we move into the future of this pandemic? And we've harnessed this energy, and we're in the midst of harnessing this energy and referring to it as a pandemic pivot. And as you heard Chris mention in his introduction, that this model of a 2.0, we're referring to as Maricopa 2.0, and that's just a different way of doing things as we move forward. None of us has the crystal ball to say how long we're going to be dealing with this pandemic and how it's going to affect the learning that takes place in and out of our classrooms. But one thing's for sure is that we have a community that needs us to respond quickly. We have an industry that needs us to respond quickly. As of early June 2020, 43 million Americans have filed for unemployment benefits. And furthermore, there was a study that said that 57 million of those jobs were vulnerable to the pandemic. So in the past, when I was president of Gateway, we were beginning to focus on creating programs and workforce opportunities to help students become robot proof. Now we're learning that not only do they need to become robot proof, they need to become pandemic proof. And so we've recently partnered with Intel to create an Associate of Applied Science in Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning, and hope that over the next several years we can train thousands of people in the Valley and across the state and the country, for that matter, in preparation for this type of work. If you haven't heard middle skills jobs, these are the types of jobs that don't necessarily require the four-year degree, but require education beyond high school. And so we're talking about short-term certificates and leading all the way up to an associate's degree. We're the biggest provider of workforce development in the state. As the bullet point indicates there, we're the #1 provider of nurses and allied health professionals in the state of Arizona. And we realize that as an institution of higher education in not only Maricopa County, but in the state, it's our duty to continue to grow this workforce and have it prepared for a sustainable economy, whether that be to be a robot-proof or whether that be a pandemic-proof economy. We realize that it's our primary duty and function to prepare the workforce for just that. So the future is unknown. Although we're preparing for it, the vast majority of our classes will be delivered online. We begin in just a couple weeks. We probably have about 10 to 15% across our district that will be delivered face-to-face. And again, those are the types of programs of mostly the CTE nature. And we're going to do that as long as we can in the fall semester. And we, in paying attention to the data related to COVID, we're seeing a nice trend in our state. As long as that trend continues, then I can foresee us being able to finish out the fall semester as we plan. But, again, we weren't thinking that the June or the July, as Chad mentioned in his slide, was going to happen the way that did. And so we've had to make some adjustments to our phased-in approach. By October 5th, we hope to be able to answer the question as to the number of employees that will be able to return in a full-time fashion as well. And I mean that in a non-remote work environment. So that's what's going on in Maricopa for now. And I know there's many questions that will give me an opportunity to give you a little more information as to what else we're doing. Thank you, guys.
All right, Dr. Gonzales, thank you. Let's bring Julie into the conversation now. Julie is the founder and executive director of Vista College Prep, a charter school just south of downtown Phoenix. An Arizona native, Julia joined Teach for America and was placed in the South Bronx teaching first grade. Julia earned a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Southern California and a Master's of Science in Teaching at Pace University. Julia, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we're excited to hear your perspective.
Thank you. I'm happy to join the conversation this afternoon. Vista, so just a little bit of background on our school and sort of how we've prioritized learning going into the fall with some lessons learned from the spring. So Vista College Prep is a kindergarten through 8th grade network of schools serving students in the Maryvale and Central City South communities. Over 90% of our students qualify for free and reduced price lunch, and over 90% are students of color. For the last 4 years, our students have dramatically outperformed all low-income schools in the city of Phoenix. And in 2018, our school is one of 5 in Arizona to receive the National Blue Ribbon Award and the only school serving our demographic of students. And like the superintendent and chancellor just shared, the school closures have forced all of us to reinvent how we are delivering education while maintaining the culture and relationships that really previously defined our in-person learning. And so during the school closure in the spring, we really had 3 goals. We prioritized connection, checking in on the health, safety, and wellness of our staff and students, access, ensuring all students could access their learning with a device and connectivity, including our most vulnerable and special needs students, and quality. Our continued goal is to fight the notion that this will go down as a lost year for our students. And so we launched a fully virtual program like all of the representatives you just heard in 8 days, created how-to videos in Spanish and English to support our families, and set daily live office hours and tutoring groups for our students and their families. And with that, averaged over 90% student attendance each week. And so as we closed out the school year and moved into the summer, we really created 11 different working groups across the organization to prepare for what the start of the school year would look like. One was devoted to fully rethinking summer school. We launched a first ever summer school program to address learning gaps from the spring. We had over 400 of our students sign up, created a partnership with Boys and Girls Clubs and UMOM to offer our curriculum and summer programming to the children that they serve. And we also set up a partnership with NAU that will continue this fall, where we provided training to their student teachers who then helped provide individualized instruction for our children as well. And one of the other working groups that I'm sure both the superintendent and chancellor had as well was focused solely on building readiness. And this group spent their evenings reading CDC guidelines, measuring every single one of our classrooms to determine how many students could safely social distance, and sitting in on webinars from schools across the country trying to distill best practices. And so with deep uncertainty, the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 to the students and families we serve, as well as a point I hear Chad repeatedly say, not making week-by-week decisions, the idea of giving our families and teachers some sense of predictability was critical. And so therefore we decided to push our start date for in-person learning to October 12th. However, at the end of the day, I really do think that dates that are quite meaningless unless we have a set of benchmarks and data-driven goalposts for what it really means to safely reopen. And we're really looking forward to those being released by the state tomorrow. So yesterday we launched our first day of virtual learning, looking very similar to the photos that you just saw. We had over 95% of our staff return, 100% of our teachers return, and we'll serve over 1,000 students this year. And so we will continue the distribution of free breakfast and lunch to all of our families. We just completed a 3-week virtual staff training focused on best practices, content development, and diversity, equity, inclusion. And so now as we head into the virtual start of the school year, we're really doing so with 3 key lessons learned from the spring and the summer. The first is that despite pushing our start date back to October 12th, we deeply believe that elementary children need to be in school. And so any notion that maybe this is a unique opportunity to innovate around digital learning, specifically for our kindergarten through 2nd grade kids, we just don't think holds true. And so we found a host of other opportunities to learn and innovate, which I'm happy to share. But this age group more than any other needs in-person learning. And so if there are opportunities for us to have a phased re-entry back into our building, we will prioritize this age group. And the second, as you heard mentioned earlier, is that asynchronous or pre-recorded lessons only, we do not believe are effective means of instruction. And so we believe these types of lessons must be combined with synchronous or live lessons, and we fully prioritize that this year across all grades. And then third, which I'm happy to share more about later, is we really must create partnerships and not work in silos. And so our partnership this summer with NAU, UMOM, and Boys and Girls Club was a win for everyone. We increased the number of children we impacted, student teachers received additional training, and kids received more individualized instruction. And so we look forward to building on these partnerships as we move into this next school year. And so with that, I'll turn it back to you, Eric.
Hey, Julia, thank you for that perspective. And we do have a very large live audience right now. And I do want to remind everybody that that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We do have a lot of questions to get to, but if you do feel the need and you have a question, you can use that function there. Again, our panelists are going to stick around and we'll try to answer a lot of those questions. Okay, let's bring in Stephanie into the conversation. Stephanie is the Executive Director at All In Education, a first-generation American citizen, born and raised in Yuma. She began her career as a child advocate, later became an instructor at ASU and NAU. She has also served on the Phoenix Union High School District Governing Board since 2014. She holds a BS in Justice Studies and Psychology and an MS in Higher and Post-Secondary Education from Arizona State University. Stephanie, you have the privilege of going last after all of our previous panelists, so very excited to hear your perspective as we talk and keep this conversation going on education this fall.
Thank you so much. It is such a privilege and an honor to join an esteemed group of leaders, so thank you for the invitation. Some quick background on All In Education. We are a new education advocacy organization focused on ensuring that the communities that are most impacted by inequity in our schools be the ones that have a voice at the decision-making table when we're talking about solving these really big challenges that lie ahead. A lot of what we heard in the stories before are issues of equity, and really what the pandemic has done is it's exposed what those of us that have been working in the system have known for a really long time, that our system is riddled with inequity, that your zip code unfortunately sometimes defines the quality of your education or the level of resources that you have access to. And it really does take the ones that you've heard from in Dr. Gestson, Julia, and Dr. Gonzales to be innovative within the confines that they are bound by, to get creative and to provide the appropriate support for students in their school communities. And so, but you know, with those really big challenges, we at All In believe that we have to address these systemic barriers. Our initial work, you know, I started in this role on April 1st. It was 2 weeks before schools closed, a really crazy time to launch a new organization or to start a new position. But certainly for us, it was important to meet the moment and to take time to listen to the community and to listen to what they were going through. And so we spent 4.5 weeks having community conversations, a lot like this one. We outreached to parents and educators in the Maricopa County, Pima County, and Yuma counties, which have a very large population of Latino students. And we heard stories about their experiences during school closures, and a lot of what we feared going into the conversations were validated. You know, these issues of gaps in connection to their school community. So we heard from Spanish-speaking parents who hadn't heard from their schools since they closed in March, and we were having a conversation with them in mid-May. And we also heard the really big issues around the digital divide and the technology gaps. The digital divide wasn't just about access to technology, it was also a technical skills gap. So we had parents that, you know, said, I'm really grateful that my school community let me borrow a laptop, but I've never turned this thing on before and I don't know how to use it. So I still can't help my kid. There's nobody that I can call. There isn't a help desk or any guidance available to me. And then even our most tech savvy parents were completely overwhelmed with being asked to be educators at home, right? So to be that instructional support partner, they just did not feel equipped to do it. They were even overwhelmed with the software platforms. And I will be the first to admit, I am still learning all of this environment every day. It's a new lesson for me as we're navigating this new reality that we're all facing. And then, of course, we heard the economic challenges that families were being impacted by, stories of job loss and those struggles in the home. So, you know, again, that was in April and May, these conversations. So now that we're so far along, I can only imagine what those economic challenges look like today as the pandemic rolls on, and as the economic implications get wider. And then, of course, our parents that had students with special needs and English learners we're really concerned about their students falling behind in this environment and not having access to that, you know, one-to-one support and instruction available to them. But really what we learned in all of this, you can go ahead and hit the next slide, is that we have to build a collective effort and a collective movement in order to advance and solve for equity. We really need our leaders to, all of us need to operate from that same frame and lens. And when we pulled together this in our report, and I'll share the link on that final slide, is, you know, we're calling this the equity framework, where we are making decisions grounded in equity, where we are analyzing how our decisions are going to impact Latino youth, youth of color, and low-income families, and we're questioning our own assumptions, our own biases about those impacts, and how our decision is going to burden or benefit communities, and really being intentional in our decision-making going forward around new policies, new practices, and new programs as we are building them, and making sure that at the end of the day, we have data that demonstrates that this is any new policy, any new practice, any new program is actually going to yield opportunity for Latino youth, youth of color, and low-income families, because without that, you know, we have a long-standing history in Arizona of widening opportunity gaps rather than closing them. And so the leaders who are intentional in our community about closing that opportunity gap are the ones who see success in their students. And you've already heard the stories from Dr. Gestson and Julia about how they are getting outcomes in the midst of all of this for their students, because they're being intentional leaders and thoughtful around the issues of equity. Our biggest recommendation in all of this is that parents need to be involved in their students' educational experience. That family and community engagement, that parent engagement, is such a critical component. And COVID has, if it's done anything, it's really opened our eyes to how critical parents are in the success of their students' academic achievement. And so the final slide, you can click next there. For our full report, folks can go to allineducation.org/report, and you'll see all of the findings from the conversations that we had and our key recommendations going forward. But again, thankful for the opportunity to join this conversation, and look forward to answering any additional questions.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Yes, and it is time. Let's bring all the panelists back in, because it's time to get to those questions. Chad, we have a question coming in, and during your presentation, I wrote it down because it struck me. You said empty classrooms, full screens, and then seeing those pictures of the teachers sitting in the empty classroom, and then there's the Zoom with the full screens. And this is on the topic of reopening. And I love what Julia said. As parents, I'm a parent myself. I have 2 elementary school children. That week-to-week sort of planning was very difficult for us. And then, so the question is, when it comes to deciding when to reopen schools, what are those key factors that you are looking for?
Yes, first, I agree with what Julia talked about. She wants to get K2, K3 back in as soon as possible. And she also knows this. We want to get every kid back in as soon as possible. And so we, much like Julia, we had 9 school models. We had 4 school models and 9 task forces working for months to try to bring students back. And so we are, just off the top, we are committed to getting people back as soon as possible. 2 things we're looking for. One, Julia mentioned that we'll have some metrics come out from the state. I also serve on the county's committee that's also going to recommend some metrics for when schools can come back. So it's going to be a combination of 2 things. One is, what's community spread look like? At what point do we get down to that 5% number? Whatever that number ends up being. But when community spread is at a reasonable rate, then and only then can we come back. Schools, right, are part of the community. We're not going to come back and be these health islands when the rest of the community has spread. So one is the right level of spread, the reduction. But second is, we also are constantly surveying our staff and make sure we have the right workforce to come back. We can't say, hey, we're coming back in October and yet we still have many staff members that are unable to come back in or unwilling to come back in. So schools will constantly live at this intersection of community spread and workforce readiness and availability. And we're hoping, like Julia, we're hoping to come back in October.
And I'll bring Julie into the conversation. One of the questions coming in, what are some silver linings that you found during this time? And I think you phrased it more as what are some key lessons learned? And again, from personal experience, I have a second grader and a fourth grader and realized this isn't going to work for my second grader, but my fourth grader is doing okay. What are some of those other key lessons that you have learned during this process, whether it's, again, going back to the spring or what you've learned during the planning process for the fall?
Sure. So I think, one of the most important things that I think I've heard kind of repeated across the panel is the need for the sort of idea of synchronous instruction and live instruction. I think that is by far one of our biggest lessons learned, and certainly something that we're prioritizing. We've heard a lot of stories from, people sending home just work packets, people, doing pre-recorded lessons, all of the above. But I think if we were to get down to, where we saw the biggest gains, it's what we did over the course of the summer. We piloted it for 4 weeks. Small group guided reading for all of our kindergarten through 5th grade students, and then additional work for our middle schoolers. If we can get to a point where that is fully synchronous, we feel like that will have the biggest impact in terms of continuing to close the opportunity gap for our kids. In terms of silver linings, I think that we have some really interesting lessons learned around how to leverage some of our master teachers across the entire network. And so how to take some of our most veteran, our strongest teachers, serving as some primary instructors, being able to quickly drop in classrooms, provide some quick feedback, get our principals and kind of the team across the building in a way. I mean, we had a lot of meetings throughout the day yesterday on day one. We've really never had meetings on a typical day one of school, because everybody is throughout the building or going across campuses. And so I think the opportunity to be able to be in the classrooms all the time, so to speak, giving that live feedback, which is a huge component of our model and where I think our teachers have really grown over the course of the last years. That has been by far one of the biggest silver linings for us.
That's great. And a great question coming in for Dr. Gonzales here, talking about the economy. What is being done to rebuild momentum for CTE and skills training? The economy still needs these skills, but they do require hands-on training.
Right. And, thank you, Eric. As I mentioned in my introduction, in spite of the fact that we're dealing with a pandemic, we were able to partner with one of the largest chip manufacturers in the world, with Intel, which we hope will create thousands of job opportunities for folks out there that are interested in that line of work. The other thing that we're doing is it's a priority for our organization for those CTE courses to be on our campuses in learning in a safe face-to-face environment. And those were the only courses that we allowed to come back from spring who couldn't complete, to come back this summer and complete, because we understand that these students need to complete their programs and get into the workforce as quickly as possible. And we know that the industry needs the workforce prepared as quickly as possible. So we're doing that in a very safe manner. We'll continue to explore other partnership opportunities for any industry partners that want to engage with us. As Julia and Chad mentioned, getting kindergartens first and second graders back is a priority. Getting community college adult learners is also a priority, because we find that through research, engagement is one of the #1 predictors of the student's ability to succeed. And in an online remote work environment or learning environment, we find that is probably one of the most challenging aspects of that, is to engage the learner while you're doing it in the mode that we're doing it in here. Fortunately, we've got an amazing faculty across our district, an amazing amount of leaders across our district that have a ton of experience. We do have some faculty that have never taught in an online environment, and they're learning quickly. They spent many hours this summer learning from master professors that have got the good experience. And again, it's all back to getting folks ready for getting into the workplace as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzales. Stephanie, let's bring you back into the conversation. Question coming in regarding, and speaking about parents, and you talked a lot about that. As you know, school is much more than what is taught in lesson plans. There's the social skills involved, and there's the interaction. So what recommendations do you have for parents who are either concerned or just faced with those virtual challenges of assuring that their children are learning both academically and they continue that social education and skills building as well?
Yeah, certainly. So, I think it's such a lesson learned. Our parents really have to help our students find those social interactions in a different way in this environment, because it is absolutely critical. We did hear stories from parents that their children were kind of experiencing, behavioral issues because of the social isolation. So if there are safe ways for them to create peer-to-peer interactions, and really look for ways to partner with their school communities in order to find that. I think my biggest advice to parents going forward is to really lean into speaking up and talking directly to your educators, talking directly to your school leaders, asking questions and using them as a resource in this moment. I think so often, especially parents in our low-income communities, kind of trust that the system is going to take care of their kids, and I often say, it is to no fault of the system leader or the school leader, because they are all well-intentioned, but when we have issues of equity and access, parents have to be informed and involved and really be advocates for their students and the needs of their kids. And so my biggest piece of advice is to get involved, be engaged, and be a supportive partner as we're navigating this, because I know that we need the support. Educators need the support from parents if we're gonna be successful in this.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Question coming in, and Chad, I'm going to hit you with this one. I'll let you take a crack at this. If you had the chance to just dream, taking out politics, resource limitations, what could the future of education look like?
Well, first of all, it would certainly take some more funding as we think about some of these opportunities that lie ahead of us, right? You heard Julia talk about the importance of digital content, right? Being able to really meet the individual needs of students. The future of education is really going to have a strong digital component. Even when students are back in classes, you heard about workforce development from Dr. Gonzales and from Chris. The future of workforce is technological and tech skills. And so I think when we think about the future, it is combining technology, really strong digital content. But what we also hear and see from business and industry is that the soft skills matter just as much, that we want our kids to be able to collaborate, to be great communicators and problem solvers. And so I think it's really highly individualized curriculum, but that also uses technology in a very different way. I think long gone are educators just sitting up in front of a room of 30 students and delivering just a lecture. Tech integration, I think, should and will forever change what education looks like.
Yeah, and Julie, I'd love to hear you weigh in on that same question.
Sure. Well, I couldn't agree more with Chad on kind of the individualized level of instruction and really understanding that digital will play a real role in that. I think the other piece I would point to is just generally around talent. And we know that still the #1 predictor of student achievement is not race or socioeconomic status, it's teacher quality. And so without any resource limitations, and again, funding plays a role, but without any resource limitations, I think we would have an educator in every classroom, let alone an outstanding one. And so right now, still with a $34,000 average starting teacher salary and nearly 8,000 vacancies last year, our statewide talent pipeline is still just not big enough or strong enough to ensure that all children have access to the high quality education that we want for them. And so I think I would put it back to how are we investing continuously in that talent pipeline to ensure that we have an educator that is ready to meet all of the demands, as you just heard from our panel, of what our children need, both social, emotionally, as well as academically.
And Julie, I have a quick follow-up question for you, and Chad alluded to this in his presentation a little bit, but as schools close here, low-income students face unprecedented food scarcity. So how are schools and the community responding at this point?
Sure. So, during the school closure period, schools had the option of providing meals to their students and families. And like you heard Chad share, and many districts across the state, everybody was committed to ensuring that our students and families still had access to those meals. And so for us, despite being a relatively small school community compared to Dr. Gonzales and Dr. Gestson, we served nearly 25,000 meals during the closure and into the summer. And I know many districts did the same. And so during a typical school year, to sort of give some context, to qualify for free breakfast or lunch, a family of 4 needs to be making under $34,000 for the year. And so with over 90% of our students qualifying for free lunch, our families deeply depended on our school to provide their meals. And so I think long-term, schools really need to continue to receive flexibility, which we've been given from the Department of Education, on how and when we can provide these meals. And so, for example, and I think as Chad suggested, it was easier for most of our families, many of whom do not have access to reliable transportation, to have a one-day pickup where they could receive their meals for the entire week, as opposed to needing to come to school daily for those pickups. And so we were able to make that change early on, and I think are able to serve more students as a result of that.
All right, question coming in for Stephanie. Stephanie, you mentioned, parents need to be involved in this part of the education process. And again, even in my household, it is a juggling act right now. And so how are you assisting, or what programs are available for families that don't have somebody that can stay at home and help their children learn?
Yeah, we're actually working on a concept right now. The schools will have to provide on-site learning opportunities. That's part of the executive order starting on August 17th. And so I'll defer to Dr. Gestson and Julia to share more about their plans for that. But I think from our perspective, when we think about it, certainly there are families that need to work in order to support their families. We want to get creative about how we do workforce development. Julia talked about the need to increase our teaching workforce, and that we do have a major gap in that. We also have a huge gap in the diversity of our teaching workforce. 46% of our student population is Latino in the state of Arizona, and only 15% of the teaching workforce is Latino. So for us, it is, we often think about workforce development as a way to recruit out-of-state talent to come into our state and take jobs here. And from our perspective, we have to stop looking out of state and look to our community as the talent pipeline and give them access to opportunities. And certainly we are working on a concept called the Parent Educator Academy, where we will develop parents, give them the technical skills that they need to be a support partner with our teachers in the classroom in this digital environment, give them access to the technology that they need, and hopefully put them on a pathway to become a paraprofessional or a future certified educator, if that's a career option for them. So for us, it is about creating strategies that really give people the added skill sets that they need to be successful. And as far as the on-site learning opportunities, I'll defer to my colleagues on the panel here.
Yeah, I'm just going to open it up, guys. And that is probably one of the biggest conversations in my circle of parents is we can't always be in the home. We still have to work. So again, I know you've been in a lot of these conversations. What is your perspective on that for households where the parents can't be involved in the learning process?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things. One is I do know that there are many families that want their kids to go back to school. There's also many families that need their kids to go back to school, whether that's because they are unemployed, because there is not a place to send students. We have a lot of youth with special needs, academic needs and physical needs that really need to be back. And so I know that school systems like Julia's, and I meet weekly with every superintendent here in Phoenix, that we are working on plans. In many ways, you heard Julia talk about maybe phasing students back in. And so when we believe it's safe, and school systems are charged with August 17th to think about how can you bring back your most vulnerable. And what we are looking at right now is identifying who truly are the most vulnerable. Students with special needs. Many students are homeless. They were homeless before. We have more now. And how do we start to slowly, carefully open up certain parts of our campuses to get students back on? But I think if there's any perception that 8/17 means schools back and parents can start dropping off kids, and that is not going to be the case. It's not safe. Schools aren't equipped to do that yet. But we are going to work on getting the most vulnerable back as soon as possible.
Julia?
I would echo what Chad shared. I think I'm really eager to see the benchmarks and understand. I mean, we've sort of all been looking at that 5% over 14 days positivity average. And so we're not there yet, obviously, as a community, in particular in the communities that we serve. And so we're finding, as we continue to survey our families, that the survey results we got in June are very different from the survey results we're getting now, where and they're almost completely flipped. And so at this point, we have almost 70% of our families who are even uncomfortable or unsure about sending their child back to school in person in October. And so as we think about what that means for August 17th, certainly, obviously, we'll be in full compliance with the executive order, but we think that the percentage of students who will actively choose that is actually going to be quite lower than what we originally anticipated. And so obviously accommodating, and to the point of a phased approach, certainly we want all of our K-8 kids back, but who are our most vulnerable, and to the point of K-1 and 2, once we get to a place where community spread is in a much more manageable and kind of under that 5% threshold, or whatever the final percent decides to end up being, that is where we will be making the move to quickly and urgently ensure that we are thoughtful about getting our kids back into the building, as well as ensuring that our teachers, to Chad's point earlier, we have a workforce to accommodate them.
Julia, thank you. Question coming in for all the panelists, but Dr. Gonzales, I'll bring you into the conversation here. In identifying where support can come from, and in our audience right now, we have a lot of business leaders, community leaders, and so how can businesses support education in the upcoming year? Where do you see that coming into factor?
That's a great question, Eric. Even for the pandemic, we quickly realized with limited resources that we can't do this entirely by ourselves. So we find ourselves seeking out partners that are, that got a mutual interest in serving our community and serving our students. Some of the partners that we have are on this call here today. Some of the partners are participants in today's session. So I would encourage any business leaders out there that want to help and to reach out to us, and let's just start that conversation that just says, I want to help. I'm not sure what I can do. I'm not sure what my organization can do, and I'm willing to bet that we can sit down and come up with a way that we can serve our community, to support our students that are currently enrolled, and then possibly what can come out of that is that there's a mutual gain and being partners with one another. So there's so many ways to answer that question. It just depends on who comes forward. But I wouldn't want any business to think that they are too small or too big to step forward and ask that question.
Yeah, and to the other panelists, are there any stories where in specific cases where you've seen a business step up and maybe that is like a positive that we can repeat or other business owners can repeat who are looking to give back and support?
I'll share a quick example. We recently took South Mountain High School, which has been around since the 50s, transformed South Mountain into 4 separate academies. It's now known as the Academies at South Mountain. We have 4 career and college academies. And an example is one of those is an engineering pathway. And so we've worked with engineering firms that come in and will co-develop lessons to make sure that the curriculum is really relevant to what engineering looks like today and what it'll look like tomorrow. Externships where we can send our teachers to actually spend a day, this is pre-COVID, but you can do this virtually now, actually spend a day in the life of what an engineer looks like today so they can bring that experience back. And then likewise to have guest teachers come in and really spend time with our kids and mentoring. And so especially at the high school level, although there are certainly ways to engage, but especially at the high school levels, we're developing college, career, and life-ready students. There are many ways to engage.
And I can jump in here. I think for, the pressing issue that we see is addressing the issue of the digital divide and access to technology, laptops, and affordable, reliable internet for low-income families. And so certainly always looking to partner with technology and industry companies that provide these services to find ways. Cox Communications has been really great with their Cox Connect to Compete program, having that affordable model for low-income families, but making sure that that service is something that's reliable, that can keep their family online. And so unfortunately, though, Cox doesn't service all of Arizona. And so we need additional partners in this space to really expand access to broadband, I'm serving on Superintendent Hoffman's technology task force. So as those recommendations are coming forward, certainly we will need business partners in this space so that we can create systemic change and really get more people online.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stephanie. And as we close out here, we're wrapping up in just a few moments, but I will give each of the panelists an opportunity for some final remarks regarding this amazing discussion we've had, the presentations we've had. So Julie, I'll bring you back in just for some final and closing thoughts after everything we've talked about today and the presentation we saw. And again, have a very large live viewing audience that would love to hear your perspective after what we've seen.
Sure. I guess to just, continue out from the kind of what can business do and to echo what the previous panelist just said, I think that the idea, and to potentially kind of end with, is this idea of just continued quality. And so continuing to be strong advocates for academic quality, I think is an exceptionally powerful way that any business and any community leader can continue to truly advocate for education in Arizona. So much of the equity issues, so many of the equity issues that Stephanie addressed, are people continuing to speak out and advocate for just truly quality across all schools. And so I think that the pandemic has really given families a window into their children's classrooms. And so again, there's certainly deep inequities in education, some of which are certainly related to funding. But I think at the most basic level, continue to be rooted in the level of expectations we've traditionally had for low-income students of color. And so as we, as business leaders, as community leaders, can continue that push for what does it mean to demand excellence across all schools, even in a pandemic, I think that is a place that we at Vista College Prep continue to sort of stay rooted in, and which I would challenge everybody on this call to continue to focus on.
Yeah, thank you for that, Julia. And Dr. Gonzales, we'll bring you back in for some final thoughts.
Sure, thank you, Eric. Thank you again for this opportunity this afternoon. You might have heard the term gap year, and that's a time that students are choosing to not enroll in college or community college or university level. I would encourage any callers on here that have kids or are thinking about going back to school themselves to not take a gap year. Stay connected, even if it's just one class. We understand that there's uncertainty, but we're ready. We stand ready to assist you. If it's limited resources, if it's technology, if it's funding, let us work with you to solve that problem, but stay connected in higher education and then get back in full-time as quickly as you can so that you can get into the workforce as quickly as possible and to change your situation socially and economically. Thank you.
Dr. Gonzales, thank you. Stephanie, some great points from you throughout the afternoon. Any last thoughts here?
Sure, just a couple of thoughts. I'm often asked, can't we just go back to normal? Are we ready to go back to normal? And for us at All In Education, we don't want to go back to normal because normal was not working for all students. Our system is riddled with inequity, and the pandemic really exposed that. And we have to work thoughtfully, intentionally, to ensure, to Julia's point, that all students have access to high quality education, that all students have access to an excellent educational experience. And so we have an opportunity. If I'm looking for silver linings right now, it's an opportunity to redesign, reimagine how we do school. And our system leaders that are doing that are seeing success. And certainly you heard those stories from Dr. Gestson and Julia and Dr. Gonzales. And the final point I will make is that we are, this is an unprecedented time. This is a challenging time for all of us. And I would just encourage our parents and educators alike and community partners to be patient and be kind with each other. We are all navigating a really difficult environment. And know that, I know that it's going to be a struggle. It's been a challenge for all of us, but we will get through it together. We just have to be a little more patient, a little kinder to one another.
Well said, Stephanie. Chad, I'll let you wrap us up here. You started with that powerful presentation, which is images from the previous year, where we are now. And, we've all said it, we don't have a crystal ball. So I'll let you wrap us up here.
I think you've heard from a lot of people today talk about equity and achievement gaps and digital divide. And I think it's just really important for us to remember why is that always the discussion when you talk to educators and educational leaders and even economic developers. The reality is that the kids sitting in K-12 today are the workforce of tomorrow. And youth sitting, if I just talk about Phoenix proper, the K-12 system, districts and charters, there are about 150 to 200,000 K-12 students sitting in classrooms today. The vast majority of those are low income. The free and reduced lunch rate of Phoenix proper is about 90%. 90% of all K-12 students sitting in seats today in Phoenix are low income. And low income students, if they do not receive a high quality education, will not become the high quality workforce that we want. And so we must take this opportunity where we are seeing gaps more than ever today, and really rethink about priorities of our city and of our valley and of our state. We must fund appropriately. You heard about the digital divide. We must make sure that all of our kids are connected. You heard Julia earlier today say that teachers can start at $32,000, $34,000 a year for 32 to 34. She also then later said that poverty is $34,000 a year with 4 people in your household. We're starting teachers at poverty wages. We are not putting devices and connectivity in the hands of all of our students, and yet we expect very different outcomes. Right? The community college wants students that are more ready for community college because Chris Camacho says, if I'm going to go out and recruit businesses and develop business, I need a workforce. That starts in classrooms. And as Stephanie said, that also starts in households. And I would just hope that we use this time to really step back, reflect, and reinvest differently in our future workforce. Our kids deserve it, but our economy certainly needs it.
And guys, great, well said. Chad. Question that just came in, very poignant to our discussion. You can all just quickly answer. Who would be the point of contact within your organizations for businesses looking to assist? And I'll just go around the table real quick. Chad?
Yeah, in our district, you could email superintendent@phoenixunion.org and we'll get it to the right person.
Okay, Dr. Gonzales?
You can email me directly at stephen.gonzalez@domail.maricopa.edu, and I will direct you to the right person.
Perfect. Julia?
Similarly, feel free to email me, jmeyerson@vistacollegeprep.org. Thank you.
And Stephanie?
And they can email me directly, stephanie@allineducation.org.
All right, before we do the stare into the camera, take a picture real quick, I do want to remind everybody that the next regional report, again, another very timely topic, will be on the status of sports, the return to sports. That will be Tuesday, August 25th. From 11 a.m. to noon. And as always, you can check out past installments of the regional report by visiting GPEC's website, gpec.org/blog. Okay.